Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to this press conference with Alan Kyerematen of Ghana. Mr. Kyerematen will give a very brief opening statement and then we will take your questions. We have only 30 minutes. I would ask in the interests of time and fairness that you please limit yourself to but one question. Mr. Kyerematen, you have the floor, please, sir.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First, let me take this opportunity to thank you for coming. And just to start off our interaction, the challenge that confronts the WTO now is for us to revitalize what I think is an extremely important organization. This organization, it's a great global asset that has contributed significantly to the expansion of the global economy. And to the extent that it is the only organization that negotiates trade rules and settles disputes, I don't think that there's a replacement for this organization. If we also look at current developments, the challenges in the global economic and financial environment, this is the only organization also that provides a firewall against protectionism and also becomes an instrument for global economic recovery. So in spite of all the challenges, and I don't want to devalue the fact that we have challenges in what we're doing here in Geneva and around the world in promoting trade. In spite of all these challenges, I think that the organization needs the support not just of its members, but the wider community that impacts on trade. Now, having said that, I think it's obvious, but as lawyers, we say for the avoidance of doubt, I have made the presentation to the General Council. I'm seeking the position of the Director-General of the WTO, and I predicate my quest to become the Director-General on a new trade consensus. Now, this new trade consensus is a strategic framework for enhancing not just the multilateral trade agenda, but also being able to take into recognition and then try and then identify the new strategic areas in the global dynamics that impact on trade. And I would like just to highlight the 5 core strategic driving factors for this new trade consensus. First is for members to build a political consensus that will commit them to the core values of this organization. Let us focus in this regard on the things that divide, that promote unity amongst members rather than those things that divide us. I think that's the first strategic driving factor that I'd like to emphasize. Secondly, is a recognition that the WTO belongs to all its members and that the interests of each member is important, and we need to take this into consideration in our decision making. The third is for members and the organization as a whole to reach out more proactively and actively to the business community, to civil society, those who also impact on the work of the WTO. Fourth is for us to look at a more robust and dynamic approach to development and growth. And last but not the least, that we recognize the need in this organization to manage the relationship between multilateralism and then regionalism. Now, these are the strategic driving factors for the new trade consensus. And that is the paradigm and the basis for which I proceed with this interaction. Thank you.
First question for Jamil Chada, please. Jamil, you have the floor.
Sir, hi. I'm a journalist from Brazil. My question is about developing countries. Today, the WTO still divides its members between developed countries and developing countries. Do you think it is appropriate to divide the developing countries into different categories? For example, China, India, Brazil in one side, and creating a new category? Or do you think you still can put in the same package China and let's take a country in South America, Paraguay, for example?
This is a controversial and burning issue that has engaged the attention of members, and I believe the role of the Director General is to facilitate an open, transparent discourse and dialogue on this subject, and not to be seen to have already ab initio determined the solution to this problem. The reason why I say this is that the classification that we have is developing and then developed countries. I'm aware that there are countries that have sought a carve-out within this context. And my sense is that this is an issue that has to be agreed on, if indeed there's the need to actually subdivide the existing two divisions. This is something that the members have to agree on, and if in their collective wisdom this has to be done, they would have to take that decision.
The
next question is Assis Mohera. Assis, you have the floor.
My colleague question, what's your personal opinion about the graduation, about just this differentiation between developing countries? Your personal opinion. And secondly, how engaged...
Wait, no, just one question, Assis. Sorry.
It's the compliment.
No compliments. One question.
I suggested in my response to your colleague that the role of a Director General is to facilitate consensus. And in facilitating consensus, my understanding is that if you start with driving the facilitation process with your own personal opinion, literally you've already taken sides. And that I think, ought to be the way the Director General should approach this matter. Maybe just to re-echo what I said, there's a basic classification. We have developed countries, we have developing countries. The only other classification that is more or less agreed within the framework of the WTO is the LDCs, and that has its own basis for classification. The UN is involved in that. And any discourse or dialogue about subdividing any of these divisions will have to be arrived at by consensus amongst the members.
Tom Miles, et puis Marie Noël.
As I'm sure you know, your nickname in the Ghanaian media is Alan Cash, but the world of trade runs on credit and not cash. So the WTO has enough problems already without worrying about any insinuation or hint of corruption. Can you tell us how you got this nickname, and what does it tell us about why you would be a good Director General? Thanks.
That is an interesting question, particularly from the perspective of a name that you probably might have picked up from the political circles in Ghana. I'm not sure that would have enough time for me to go through the entire story. But having said that, the basis for that is because when I ran my political campaign, I ran on the basis that the most important thing that any government, any candidate must focus on is creating jobs. And it is only when you create jobs that people will be able to make an income. And so it's more about creating jobs and that being the basis of people making an income, which is what reduces poverty and creates wealth. So that's where it is coming from. But in terms of how I see myself and what I believe makes me the right person for this job, if you look at the challenges that confronts this organization, and you look at the work that the Director-General has to do to be able to address these challenges, my sense is that you need an individual who will come to this job with a combination of skills and experiences. It is true that there's a technical component of this job that supports the analytical work of the Secretariat. Now, in that regard, I will come to this job not only as an economist, but also as a lawyer. And I think these are the two most important requirements in terms of skills that would help a DG contribute to the strategic guidance for analytical work of the organization. But I also come to this job as somebody who is a practical negotiator, and I've been involved in negotiations at the bilateral level, at the multilateral level, at the regional level in Africa as a practical negotiator. But I'll come to this job also with extensive management experience, both from the private sector and then also from the public sector. And my sense is that even if you have a good DG who has good technical skills, in the long run, you have an organization to run. And this is a very important organization. And I think that is one of my major strengths. But I'll also come to this job with political insights, which I think are absolutely critical in a job like this. Because in spite of all the work that is done in Geneva, it is really during the ministerial meetings that whatever decisions are taken are ratified. And so that political strategic intuition, I think, is very important. And I can make a contribution in that regard. But I also come to this job also as a diplomat. And having been ambassador to the United States, where literally your day job is to negotiate on almost every transaction, I come to this job with that experience and skill, and which I think is also very important for the position of a Director-General. So I think that if I have the honor and privilege to become the DG, this will be an opportunity for me to bring my combined skills to impact on the work of the DG.
Oui, Noël, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, bonjour.
Yes, sir. I will have the following question. There were two candidates to the post of Director-General, and I would like to know which African countries are supporting you.
If I heard you well, your question was that there are two candidates and you'd like to know from Africa, and you'd like to know which countries are supporting my candidature. That's a difficult question to respond to because we've just started the process. It will take some time for us to find out exactly who supports your candidature, and at that point in time, I'll be in a better position to respond. But having said that, I want to put it on record that there's only one officially endorsed AU candidate. This goes through a process. Within the AU, you go through a candidatures committee, and they make recommendations to the full Executive Council of the African Union, which is made up of all foreign ministers, and then it goes to the full Heads of State Summit, and the Heads of States have the right to vary the decision from either the Candidates Committee or the... So that process was completed as far back as July at the summit, and it has been reaffirmed subsequently. So I just wanted to put that on record.
The next question will be here, please, and then Gunilla, and then Marta.
William New, Intellectual Property Watch. I was just wondering if you can describe the role of the World Trade Organization in your vision in relation to innovation as a way forward for the economies and for trade.
if I understand your question well, the innovation in respect of the work of the WTO?
If I can get you to link the two, yes, that would. It's something that's been increasingly coming up here in some of the areas that I follow, and I thought that given that the WTO is looking for ways to participate in the global economy's recovery, et cetera, continued recovery, I thought that there might be a role there, a vision there, but perhaps it's too much.
It's still not clear, but if you're talking about the concept of innovation, you can apply that to the management processes within the organization. That would be one way of looking at innovation and how it impacts on the organization. But you can also look at innovation within the context of trade itself. I mean, there's a lot of talk about technology, value chains, many of the new issues that have embedded in them the concept of innovation. All these are critical issues that are coming up on the agenda of the WTO. But it is the members who would take a decision as to how they impact, how these issues impact on the work of the WTO. So maybe if I had more clarification about what you really mean by innovation in respect of WTO's work, I would give you a more precise answer.
Gunilla, you have the floor, please.
Yes, Gunilla von Hall, Swedish Svenska Dagbladet. You were saying that you think WHO should reach out, should reach out more actively to business and civil society. Why do you think this is necessary? What would that change? And how is this going to be done concretely? Thank you.
Trade is conducted within a broader community of different stakeholders and change agents. And the reason why I'm interested that the WTO extends its reach to the business community, to civil society, is first that the economic operators who make things happen in trade come from the business sector. To a large extent. You may have state operators that are still involved in enterprise development, but to a large extent, the economic operators come from the private, particularly small and medium enterprises. And so we cannot talk about a WTO agenda through the multilateral trading system that does not reach out to those economic operators. If we took a major issue like trade facilitation that currently is on the agenda and is being discussed, particularly in the developing world, moving goods from one border to the other, looking at the simplification of customs procedures and other issues relating to trade facilitation. Those economic operators are the ones who can really tell you what trade facilitation measures are required to be able to reduce the cost of business and impact on their trade. So we definitely need to be aligned to them. However, because the WTO is an intergovernmental organization, we have to find, I would say, structured, innovative ways of enhancing our relationship with the private sector. It was not to suggest that we bring them onto the negotiating table. But maybe I can end by saying that during my time as the Minister for Trade and Industry, I took a decision to request for Ghana to host the UNCTAD 12 conference. And fortunately, I was given the responsibility to do that. But part of the condition that I was able to negotiate with UNCTAD was that we will organize the first World Investment Forum as part of the UNCTAD conference, and to ensure that the linkages between trade and investment is concretized to support the work of UNCTAD. And I must say with pleasure that on my initiative, we organized the first World Investment Forum, which has now become a major calendar event for UNCTAD. In that same regard, concretely, if I became the Director General of the WTO, I would explore with members, because they have to take the decision, the possibility of having a global trade summit, which will then provide a platform and a forum for different actors, business, civil society, and other agents. It doesn't matter whether it's every 2 years or every 4 years. The important thing is that we have to reach out to these other stakeholders. Thank you.
Marta, you have the floor, please.
Marta Hurtado, Spanish News Agency. Trade ministers on Saturday agreed in Davos that it's necessary to have an outcome in the Bali conference in December regarding trade facilitation, some issues in agriculture, and some issues that are of interest of LDCs, as big and as open like that. All agreed that this is possible, and even Mr. Lamy said that it's doable. And I saw in your speech that you agree with that, but I would like to know how are we going to get that? How, if you would be the new DG tomorrow and not in September, 2 months before the Bali conference, how you would push the members to really get something that at that time seems pretty impossible? Thank you.
Very well. What I would do if I was DG, as you said, tomorrow, again, will be to enforce and reinforce this whole concept of making sure that we achieve a balanced outcome, taking into consideration the interests of all members towards the agenda in Bali. Now, I'm aware that what is concretely on the table relates to trade facilitation and then also some issues on in agriculture in respect of the tariff quota rates, and then also food security. These are the concrete proposals. However, as you said, there's been some discussion on issues relating to the LDCs, the issues relating to the monitoring mechanism. But my understanding is that the meeting in Davos is held to try and consolidate opinions from selected members, ministers from some countries. And so, in spite of the recommendations that may have come out of Davos, the major task of the DG, and I have no doubt in my mind that Mr. Pascal Lamy would apply himself to this successfully, that they would now try and bring some of the recommendations into the wider dialogue within the WTO, because it has to be all members that would achieve consensus on the kind of concrete outcomes that you are talking about. I think that they've gone some distance, it's not done yet, and it requires extensive consultation and I would say trade-offs to be able to get to Bali with those concrete outcomes.
We have time for one more question. Yes, please.
Yes, Catherine Fiancamp-Bokonga for Chinese news agency Xinhua. I'd like to know if you become DG of WTO, how will you help the LDCs, the poorest LDCs, to have a benefit of what's going on here? Because, as you know, most of the countries are Africans, the poorest LDCs are African, and partially they're French-speaking, so they have also a problem to understand what's going on here, because often they don't have the financial capacity to translate the documents.
Well, I am from Africa. I'm from West Africa. The sub-region and the region has, I would say, the majority of LDCs. So I am psychologically committed, and my orientation is towards a program of action that will support the LDCs. So you are preaching to the converted. However, as I'm sure you are aware, there are existing special and differential treatment provisions that bestow, I would say, specific benefits to the LDCs. They are not required to make any commitments, either in the agricultural negotiations or in NAMA. And so that advantage is already there. Now, what I think it's important in the dialogue, in the discourse first, is to ensure that the measures and the provisions, preferential arrangements are not eroded over a period of time, and preference erosion obviously then takes them back to square one. In terms of implementation arrangements, I think that there is flexibilities on all the negotiating areas for them to be able to, I would say, integrate more successfully. If you look at the accession process and procedures, I think that they are being streamlined to make it easier for LDCs to participate. There are actually monitoring mechanisms in respect of the implementation of the S&D measures. So already a lot of things are on the table to support the LDCs. What I think I may be able to contribute when I have the opportunity to become the DG is to, in addition to the SDT arrangements, to look at more robust and dynamic interventions that will complement what is provided under the special and differential treatment arrangements. Because if you negotiate all the market access opportunities and you are not able to produce competitively and trade, then really those provisions do not help. So, and as part of the Aid for Trade program, as part of the Enhanced Integrated Framework, which is to support LDCs to become, I would say, more export ready and more efficient and effective in what they do. These are areas that I would like to reinforce and put additional emphasis on, to look at other interventions that can make them more competitive. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Just to let you know, the next press conference will be in this room at 4:30 with Annabelle Gonzalez. Thank you. See you then.